So as Ali mentioned, I'm Jason Hand, the DevOps evangelist at VictorOps. For those of you not familiar with what VictorOps is, it's on-call and incident management platform. You can follow me on Twitter. I do chat quite a bit about ChatOps in general. Anything you may hear today, if you're so inclined, I'd love for you to share that on Twitter and include the hashtag of both OSCON and ChatOps, so the others outside of the conference can enjoy as well. So I thought I'd start by kind of going back in time and just kind of setting the stage a little bit to how we got into this discussion about ChatOps, which is really just kind of a subtopic or subgenre within the DevOps principles. But I don't really, I'm sure, need to go through the DevOps, or I'm sorry, the Agile Manifesto for you. But the one thing that's kind of crucial to all of this is the piece about individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So a lot of what DevOps talks about is very similar to what the Agile software development kind of brought to us. And so as we know that, as we're starting to build our web operations and all of our software, we've moved into this realm where we have to kind of consider the delivery pipeline. And we know that through Agile development and those types of practices that we've gotten really, really good at delivering high quality code really rapidly, really fast. Unfortunately, that's not quite enough, because as we start to deliver this code really fast, we get into the position where we have a little bit of a bottleneck. So we're writing really good quality code, making it available, going through testing, all of the usual parts of the actual just the software development lifecycle. But then once it gets into our production environments, we've got a whole different team that actually has to manage that and operate it and make sure that it stays highly available and highly reliable. And so we've found that the speeding up of the software delivery has been great, but we actually can't keep up with it on the operations side. And so that's kind of where DevOps starts to come in, because DevOps really takes a little bit broader approach and tries to understand and tries to be empathetic for the actual end user. And we know that users don't just expect software, they expect working software, they expect it to be available, and they expect it to be always improving and always innovating. And then they expect us as our software developers and also the maintainers of the infrastructure that software runs on, they expect us to have some sort of empathy for their needs and for the things that they're trying to accomplish. And so we set out as operations people and developers to make sure that this software that we've developed and we've put all of our blood, sweat, and tears into to make sure that it's highly available. And there's a lot of people out there who put a lot of effort into making sure that it's extremely highly available. They have SLAs that say, we need to maintain a 5 nines and that type of thing. And sometimes they forget that actually high availability is actually just the result of high resiliency and high reliability. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've gotten to this point where now we don't necessarily focus so much on the mean time between failure, we actually focus on the mean time to recover, or mean time to repair. And so we hear a lot of the term fail fast, which is actually just another way of saying when things break, because things will break, we need to respond and we need to recover as quickly as possible. A lot of those who are sort of outside of the DevOps, let's just call it the DevOps community, but they've heard this word, sometimes they confuse it with just the simple idea of continuous delivery. And while continuous delivery is certainly part of the kind of key tenets or key important discussions within DevOps, DevOps is really out to kind of show us that we need to just have this constant focus on continuous improvement. And as a result, continuous delivery, continuous integration, continuous everything is sort of a byproduct of just a focus on continuous improvement. And you're not going to get through many DevOps talks without seeing some sort of quote from our main man here, Deming. And the reason is because Deming's been sort of promoting, or was promoting this type of stuff many years ago. He and many others kind of brought to the forefront, especially within manufacturing, the idea of the Plan, Do, Check Act, the PDCA, which is really just a feedback loop. And we hear some other examples of feedback loops. There's the OODA loop, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But through these ideas and through these sort of disciplines, we actually do start to focus a little bit more on this idea of continuous improvement, which, like I said, starts to give way to all these extra things. And so here's an example of the OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, act. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but the point of these feedback loops is that they actually get you to a place where you can start to learn. And I'm not just talking about learning in terms of actually ingesting information. I'm talking about real learning, where you actually start to move beyond just ingesting information. You actually start to go out and take the things that you're learning and apply them, because it's not until you actually do that that you actually begin to learn something. Some of the examples I give is, if you've ever tried to learn how to play guitar, I can sit here and I can show you with a guitar in my hand how to play certain songs. I can tell you which notes and which chords and the strumming patterns and the tempo and all that kind of stuff. But until you put a guitar in your hand, you're actually never going to really learn how to do any of that. And that type of mentality actually applies to everything, and certainly software development and the maintenance and the availability of all that as well. And so through this whole DevOps thing, there's a lot of different words, there's a lot of different concepts that have started to crop up, all, like I said, just subsets of continuous improvement. But the one that I'm here to talk about today is ChatOps. So before we dive into what is ChatOps, I thought I'd mention, for those of you who aren't maybe sort of indoctrined into the whole DevOps principles, just sort of real quickly talk about those, because they're very key to how ChatOps sort of came about, why we spend a lot of time talking about it, why we spend a lot of time sort of innovating on it and just trying to make things a lot more efficient. So anyone who ever tries to describe or tell you what DevOps is, you're going to get, for every single person you talk to, you're going to get a completely different description, a completely different answer. But a lot of times people will just try to use this CAMS or this CALMS metaphor or framework to try to understand or help people understand what it means. In a lot of cases, DevOps is really putting a focus back on the culture thing, and it's bringing empathy into what we're doing, having empathy as developers, having empathy for our operations teams as operations teams, having empathy for our developers, our marketing people having empathy beyond things outside of their walls, so on and so forth. So the idea of breaking down silos is something else that you're going to hear a lot about. And some of this culture actually starts to come about as we begin to focus a little bit more on things like automating things that can be automated. If you can automate something, it should be automated. Another big one that is actually a good starting point for a lot of teams who are trying to get into this DevOps mindset is the measurement stuff, as well as the sharing. And then, of course, lean. Sometimes people add and leave lean out because it's really more focused. It came down to the manufacturing ideas, but certainly, lean software development is something else that's also a big part of what DevOps and the principles tries to bring us. But let's go now sort of into what ChatOps is. This quote here from James Fryman, who a while ago, he's actually at GitHub, kind of around the time that a lot of this ChatOps stuff started happening. But now he's at StackStorm, and his quote is, "We're taking the things we're already doing and putting them in line with the conversations we're already having." And I think that's a really great, very succinct and unique way to sort of describe ChatOps. We're just taking a lot of the tools, a lot of the actions that we already do, and we're moving them into the places where we're having these conversations. And those can be anything from IRC, it could be, of course, Slack and HipChat, FlowDoc. There's a lot of popular open source group chat clients out there. And so that's the idea that I'm up here to talk about. Not necessarily specific to the bots, although we will talk about some of the bots that are currently being used in web operations. And some of the other speakers this morning have already talked about it or brought up, the history sort of all these bots and where they've come about. And we've been doing this thing for a very long time. A lot of people probably remember back when we were on IRC and there was all kind of bots and we had bots talking to bots, and most of them weren't all that useful, but it was really fun. It was really fun to engage with them and see what you could do. And then it sort of graduated and moved on from there. Then a lot of teams and organizations started standing up their own little XMPP and Jabber situation within their offices so that they could have group chat as well, because some of the other chatting tools that are really just instant messaging, they're not really designed for a lot of collaboration. They're not really designed for a lot of teams to come together and discuss the same types of stuff. They're really just meant for direct messaging. And that's not really what we're talking about. That's not really how you get things done in an efficient way. And then, of course, we move into where I've got number 3 there, and Campfire. And the reason why I've got sort of this little cluster of stuff underneath number 3 in Campfire is that's about the time that the term ChatOps was actually coined. So in 2012, some of the members over at GitHub started using some of their own functionality within GitHub, as well as a Node.js bot, or a Node.js application that they named Hubot. As I mentioned, their Campfire chat application, and they started doing some really interesting things within the organization to help with not only pushing out code and kind of what they call this conversation-driven development, but also more things that are more focused on the IT operations types of stuff. And then, of course, today, now we've got these really awesome and really slick, modern, persistent group chat tools such as Slack, HipChat, FlowDoc, and it seems like there's going to be more on the way for sure. So going back just a little bit more, talking about Hubot, like I said, 2012 or so, this gentleman named Jesse Newland, he gave a talk. He's given quite a few talks, actually. If you do a quick search on YouTube for him, you'll find one. And one of the more famous quotes that gets shared around is that we're placing tools right in the middle of the conversation. That's very similar to the way that James Fryman described it. So I'm just trying to think of a way to sort of describe the overall, I guess, evolution of all this stuff. And for a while, it seemed like we had a lot of problems as IT operations people and as developers. And we've got this notion of bots and persistent group chat, but we can't really find a lot of interesting things to make them do to sort of alleviate our problems or help things. And then all of a sudden we realized, well, we can just throw funny cat pictures in there, we can do pug bombs, we can do some things that actually is kind of fun and starts to just test the waters of the things that, hey, maybe if we can get it to do this, if we can get it to go talk to some API and retrieve an image, maybe we can get it to go do something a little bit more useful. And so, of course, GitHub, they know a few things about moving bits around. And so they decided to, well, let's take some of the functionality of GitHub that you would normally do from a command line, and let's leverage our APIs that we've built and make it so that we can actually do this type of stuff from within Campfire, from within the group chat. And there's going to be all kinds of extra added benefits that I'll go over in a little bit when we take this approach. So, what happens when you start to do that? What happens when you start moving these tools and all the API functionality and that kind of stuff into our group chat? Well, what happens is that, one, you can start moving notifications, the things that you care about, alerting, paging, that kind of stuff. If you're on call, you want to know when something's broken. You want to know if something's about to break. You want to know if something is down. You also want to be able to maybe take action right from within that group chat. And so you can actually start to sort of emulate a terminal session from within group chat. And then, of course, there's the collaboration piece where you get to discuss what's going on with your entire team and see if you can kind of come together or come to the, get your minds together and see if you can understand what to do moving forward. And all this is, again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the feedback loops. And shortening those feedback loops means that you've got a lower mean time to resolve or mean time to repair. And that's sort of the point of all of this, is that if we discover that there's a problem because we've got notifications and we've got things like paging and stuff like that going into our group chat, and then I can actually act on it and discuss things with my team all within the same interface, I can do things much, much, much faster. And that means a lower mean time to resolve, which means higher availability and happier users. Around the same time Jesse was working on this stuff and talking about this type of stuff, we have Mark Imbriaco at GitHub as well. And he gave a talk at Velocity just a couple years back on ChatOps as well. I've got actually throughout this deck, there's a lot of different references to some other stuff, and I've got a lot of slides and a lot of links in these slides. At the very end, I've got there's a URL so you can go and grab my slides, and that way you have these. So don't worry about trying to jot down all of these different URLs that I got in here. But Mark's someone who's been working in this ChatOps thing for a while as well, and I like the quote he has here. It's just, he's more kind of speaking to the idea of ChatOps, that it's really more a people system that is then sort of allowing our technical systems to be a little bit more advanced and allow us to do a lot more. One of my favorite stories that Mark has ever told was the time when he was at GitHub, and he was actually in a car, I think he was in the back of a taxi, and he started getting notifications to his phone via his Campfire app, and GitHub was in the middle of a DDoS attack. And so, this is something that happens at GitHub fairly frequently. And so they had provisions in place, but somebody needed to know, one, that there was a DDoS attack going on. They needed to then execute something and then have a conversation about what we're going to do about this, and then everything else that kind of follows along with that. So the story goes that Mark was in the back of a car. He got his notification on his mobile device. Something's going wrong. He then instantly calls his Hubot up and asks it to run a command which was simply just called shields up. Now, shields up was actually a bunch of scripts sort of daisy-chained together that did a lot of different things, including going out and making some changes to the IP tables. It went actually out to their ISP and tried to shut off some different things there. Basically just the normal things that they would do to mitigate a DDoS attack. He was actually able to trigger all that from his phone from the back of a taxi. And by the time that he got into the office, everything had kind of dissipated and they were able to get back to business as usual. And so this sort of showed that we had then moved beyond cat pictures. We've moved beyond just sort of fun, silly things. We've actually gotten to the point using APIs, using a lot of other instruments and tools that are out there that we can start to interact with a lot of the other services that are part of our stack. They're part of the way that we build, maintain, deliver, and all of that with all of our software. And so now we're starting to see that actually the problems that the developers and the operations teams have, a lot of our bots, with the help of APIs and going out and talking to other services, they're actually starting to be able to help us solve some of the problems that we actually have on a day-to-day basis. Timelines are something that we're all becoming used to. I was at the airport on my way here from Denver yesterday, and as I sat around, there's probably 50 people, and every single person is staring down at their device, staring down at their phone, whether that's an iPad or an Android device or even a computer, but everybody's staring down at some sort of digital device. And that's just sort of the world that we live in these days. We're used to consuming information via timelines, something like Twitter, something like Facebook, something like, this is just the VictorOps app, but even all of our group chats, that's how we ingest what's going on. That's also how we share what's going on. And so timelines have just become sort of an integral part of our day-to-day lives, not just in personal, but also in our professional lives. And the reason is that it provides us this idea of a situational awareness, where we are just sort of plugged in. We sort of know what's going on in a much deeper, much broader way at any given point. And that's just sort of how things are for a lot of us. Now, some of us are actually really good at disconnecting, and they actually enjoy that. They don't have that sense of a fear of missing out. But by and large, most of us, especially for our roles at work, we do sort of need to be aware of what's going on. We do need to be able to respond and take action quicker. This is Mary Poppendick, author of the Lean Software Development. She spoke at DevOps Days Minneapolis last year, and she had a really great quote about situational awareness, where she says that pretty much what makes a great team is that everyone on the field is aware of everything all the time. The team with the most situational awareness wins. And it's kind of like the idea, I think it's a Wayne Gretzky quote where he says, I always skate to where the puck's gonna be, not to where the puck is. And by having that awareness of just the direction that the puck is going, or the direction that the ball is moving, or the direction of all the different players on the ice or on the grass, you have a better awareness of what's going on, and you can instinctually react and make changes and do the things that need to get done in a much more quicker way. So now that we've kind of given a little bit of a preface on ChatOps and what it is and why we do it, I thought I would jump into a few examples just to sort of kind of test the water here and give you some ideas of the things that we're doing with chatbots within our group chat as far as a web operations or an IT operations type of world. Everybody's familiar with pushing code. We've seen this type of stuff. This is just a normal sort of GitHub command that you would run from your command line or from your terminal. But what if we were to take this and we actually move something very similar into our group chat? Well, you still are able to accomplish the same thing, but now I've essentially shared with everybody on my team what took place and what the result was. And I also did it equally as fast as if I had done it from my terminal. But now I don't have to take the time to do it within my terminal and then hop into group chat and communicate to my team what happened. They know exactly what happened. They know exactly how I did it. They know exactly what the results were. And now they know how to do it as well if they have to do this moving forward. Here's another example. This is actually interfacing with a bot that's running locally on my host, but I'm just going out and running a Jenkins build. This is pretty simple. A lot of times people do these Jenkins builds just from the web interface, but some people prefer, a lot of us like to operate from the terminal, from command line, and so we make it so we can do that. Well, what if we did the same thing and we moved that into chat? Again, it's the same result as when we pushed code from GitHub. Now I'm building a Jenkins platform. I'm communicating everybody on my team how it was done, what the results were. And so everybody's sort of got this better situational awareness of what is taking place within our stack and what's going on with our code base. VictorOps, like I mentioned, it's an incident management, on-call management. We're the ones that help you make sure that you get paged in the middle of the night when something breaks and you have everything you need to know so that you can fix it and get back to bed. Of course, ChatOps makes perfect sense for incident management because you're already getting these pages anyway. And if you can somehow respond to them in the same area, in the same timeline, or at least within the same sort of window of other things that are going on, it's going to help everybody know. If I'm paged in the middle of the night, I can come in here and I can acknowledge that I'm going to look at that incident. But then if I didn't do it in an area that also informs my team, I've got to take that extra step and let my team know I'm going to take a look at this incident. Here's what I'm doing to sort of kind of triage and investigate and what's going on. But if you can do that all within the same space, suddenly now everybody's on the same page. I don't have to take that extra step. And if you've ever been on call, you know that you actually do need to kind of stay heads down, focused. You want to avoid context switching. Shoulder tapping is like the absolute worst thing. Somebody coming up and asking you if it's fixed. Those are the things that just sort of drive us crazy when we're on call because we need to get these things working. We need to focus on what's causing this outage or what's causing this incident. And so by taking care of this stuff in a group chat, suddenly you can sort of keep everybody up to pace on what's going on. You can do your job, but still keep everybody else, all the other constituents, all the other people that need to know what's going on, you can keep them in the loop. You can also make it so that what if when something goes wrong, you give me the answers on how to fix it. Runbooks are super, super helpful when you're on call because they, for the most part, contain step-by-step instructions, almost a checklist type of format of exactly what you're supposed to do. So why don't you make it so that your bot or whatever your service is, whenever something breaks, actually pump that right into group chat so that everybody, again, has that awareness of this is what you're supposed to do when this type of problem happens. And in this case, it's telling me that I'm supposed to run a graph or check a graph on this host. And so I ask my bot, hey, will you go grab a graph for this host? And it puts it into chat for me. Now, I could have gone and manually done that. I could have went over into Graphite or Grafana or wherever and grabbed this graph and looked. But I asked my bot to do it for me. And I got the exact thing that I wanted, but I also shared it with everybody else on my team. So everybody knows what's going on. They know what I'm doing to triage this and to investigate and understand what's breaking and what it is we can do. And also now they know how to do that moving forward. Maybe I want to actually do something very simple like just restart Apache. The steps to restart Apache are very simple. You SSH into your box, you run the command to restart Apache, and then you move on with your day. Well, what if your bot could do that for you all from within group chat? Well, now you're doing the exact same thing, but again, you're kind of echoing to everybody else what is taking place. It's sort of like you're sharing your command history or your shell history with everybody on your entire team. So again, we go back to that situational awareness. Everybody knows what's going on, which makes things so much more efficient and so much more sort of open, and it helps with that empathy piece, which is a big, big key component of DevOps. So the idea here really is that we're moving a lot of the functionality, a lot of the things that we would normally do, either over an API or maybe just sort of SSHing into a box, and we're moving all that stuff into our group chat. We're still able to accomplish the exact same thing, but we've got all these sort of byproducts and these extra added benefits that's coming along with it. And I've identified basically 4 key areas of what those benefits are. The first one is sharing, okay, and that's a big piece of the DevOps stuff. So we're sharing exactly what's happening. We're sharing exactly what we're doing, how we're doing it. Everybody's on the same page. It's that tribal knowledge. It's that situational awareness. And then the second thing is the speed part. So I talked about, all these things you can do from a command line, or you can do from a web interface, or whatever the interface is that you were using previously. You can still do those things, but by moving it into group chat, suddenly you're able to do this stuff just a little bit faster because you're not switching back and forth from different screens or different services or logging into some other site or some other service. Then we've got the learning piece. I mentioned earlier that if I do it in group chat, now everybody knows how to do that. They're very much aware of the process and what the steps are to actually triage and understand a problem. They're understanding what the process is to actually do a new Jenkins build. And all these different things that we're starting to do, when we put them into group chat, suddenly everybody is learning how to do these things. And then the last one, we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide as well, is the security piece. Now, security obviously is a huge concern for a lot of teams, especially the larger the organizations that you work in. But the really neat thing about ChatOps is that you don't have to let your bot do something you don't want it to do. You don't have to necessarily give it God access. You just want to make it so that you can go restart a service, or you can push code. Or maybe you can do like a read-only query into a SQL database. So because of this, because you can actually make it so that the bot is only able to do very specific, very limited things, that's actually much safer than giving me sudo access into some production server, or even if it's not a production server. I don't want sudo access. I'd rather just do it from chat, because I know that my bot has very limited access, and I'm not going to fat finger something and really have some sort of meltdown with my infrastructure. But security, there's more to it than that. You don't necessarily want somebody from the front desk pushing code out into production. You want to make sure that the person who's supposed to do the things that they're supposed to do are actually authenticated and they're authorized to do so. This is my friend Michael Ansel over at Box. He gave a really great talk at Velocity, I believe it was last year, where he was talking about the fact that Box, of course, they're into security just a little bit, and they have concerns about this whole conversation of security and making sure that the right people are doing the right things, and that we're doing the things to keep our auditors happy. And so they actually built sort of a middleware piece that actually got merged into Master with Hubot, where it actually hooks into your LDAP or hooks into your AD or whatever you're using to sort of authorize and make sure that the people that are running these commands within group chat are actually authorized to do so. So it's really cool to see that there's teams out there that are starting to kind of take a closer look at this ChatOps thing, because it really is starting to get into larger and larger organizations. People see the value in it, but they have some concerns, and some legitimate concerns about the security aspect. I want to back up just real quick, because I know I've showed these pictures already, and kind of just talk a little bit about what these things are. And these are kind of three of the main bots that are being used in web operations or in IT operations. The first one here on the left is actually pronounced R2. And all of these, by the way, are all open source projects, and you can go and you can contribute to them. The middle one there is Lida. Oh, and by the way, R2 is a Python bot. So if you're interested in looking at one of these things, and Python is sort of your jam, R2 might be the way to go. Lida is a Ruby bot. It's starting to gain some traction. There's a lot of people out there joining the community and contributing code to that. And then, of course, Hubot has been around the longest and has by far the biggest community and a lot of really interesting scripts. Hubot, I mentioned earlier, is a Node.js application. So the scripts that you'll be building to run and interface with your, whether it's over an API or some other method, those are going to be either CoffeeScript or JavaScript. So it kind of depends on what language you prefer. That helps you decide which of the bots you'd like to focus on. And those are just the main three. There's actually a growing list of bots, all of them open source, of course. I'm not going to go into any of these real detail because I don't want to take too much time. But the fact is that there's more and more bots. As we know, the bot sort of hysteria is just starting to kind of amp up here, it seems, this year. And I don't think that that's going to slow down at all. Everybody seems to have their own ideas on what the bot should do. And it's really, really exciting to see so many people come together and try to build some really awesome tools in the open space area. One of the ones I definitely want to bring up, which isn't specifically a bot so much as it is a framework. This is COG, and COG is actually part of Operable. And Operable is a new organization that was started by Mark Imbriaco, who I mentioned earlier. And what they're trying to do is actually build something that actually has that access control baked right in already. So this is sort of a project that Mark and his team is working on that has, from the very get-go, a very strong focus on the security aspect of things. StackStorm is another one that I think you might want to look into. That's really not specific to a bot, but so much more of just the event-driven automation, leveraging bots as well. That's also open source that you might want to check out. This one here, serverless Slack bots. The reason why I wanted to throw this up there, and I think I've got a link so you can go check it out, there's starting to be a lot more really interesting articles out there about the things that you can do, especially within AWS. Some of the group chats we talked about, Slack, HipChat, FlowDoc. These are some, I figure, we're here at OSCON, we'd like to hear about some of the open source group chat tools that are out there. Unfortunately, I failed to put links to all of those, but if you do a quick search, you'll be able to find those. And then some other interesting services that are out there that I think are also going to help us move into deeper discussions and further understanding of what we can do in web operations and IT operations are the services IFTTT or IFT and Zapier, which are both really great services to sort of just go in and make it so that a lot of our services actually start to talk to each other. So you can start to kind of plumb some really interesting things together where you don't necessarily have to have a strong background in development to make these things work. You go in and you just sort of click and drag a few things and all of a sudden you can start attaching services to each other that can all be triggered and executed from within group chat. Some other things that I wanted to mention, we heard about it earlier, but Slack and HipChat, they both have really great sort of directories full of applications, full of all these different bots and just different services that you can plug right into your group chat. And you don't have to necessarily stand up or host your own bot. You know, Hubot, Lita, and all them, those need to actually be hosted somewhere, whether that's internal to your infrastructure, if it's running on Heroku or someplace else, it needs to be running someplace. But some of these bots are actually just going to be things that are still separate, but you can go and sort of hook up via, let's say, the Slack third-party app directory, for example. So, kind of getting towards the end here, what I'm seeing, what we're starting to see sort of in the DevOps space and in the IT operations space is that all of a sudden now it is starting to converge where all of the problems, or at least many of the problems that we have as web operations people, as DevOps, all of the things that we are concerned with throughout our day, we're now able to leverage the bot as though it's another employee, as it's another little helper. It has access into lots of different things and it has abilities that we have as well, but it can do it in a much more efficient way. And then, of course, like the things I mentioned, there's all these added benefits that are just sort of falling off, you know, as sort of great byproducts by moving a lot of the tools and services into group chat. And so I think it's really, really interesting, and hopefully, you know, we'll continue to see this trend where there's more and more people out there developing to the open source community. They're writing scripts that start to provide more and more functionality so that it can solve more of the problems that we have as both developers and system administrators and those who are responsible for making sure that our infrastructure is highly available. A couple concerns I have, kind of in closing. One is alert fatigue. You know, we start to add a lot of different things that pop up into our group chat, and it gets really, really noisy, and we start to kind of just not pay attention to as much stuff when it gets really noisy. So alert fatigue is a huge, huge issue that we have to pay attention to. Context switching, I mentioned earlier, when you start to go back and forth between different tasks, that's actually a very, very heavy cognitive load on us, and it actually starts to sort of decrease our ability to actually take action. What happens when you're on a large team? Some of these things are perfect when you're in a small team, you know, 5 to 20, maybe 50 or so people. But when you get into a large organization where you have hundreds or thousands of people, that can be a problem. And you know, you're going to have different types of concerns from a startup as you would in maybe a larger organization. And then authentication, we already kind of talked about that earlier. That's something that people are working on and hopefully will continue to get better. I've got a few additional resources here. Like I mentioned, I'll share a slide at the end that has a link where you can get all these. There's some really good conversations happening on Reddit. There's a subreddit for ChatOps. I talk a lot about ChatOps on Twitter, so you can follow me. And there's also just, you know, the hashtag of ChatOps where there's a lot of great conversations happening. Medium actually has some really interesting articles. So if you go into Medium and just search for ChatOps, you'll find some really cool stuff there. I started a Slack group that's just for ChatOps. Now, of course, there's a lot of other groups out there on Slack that are really more focused on chat bots, but we're really kind of focusing more on the things that you would do with these chat bots within the realm of IT operations and maintaining web operations at scale. And then you can go to my site, jasonhand.com, and I've got a couple things that I've written there as well. A few videos, that's Mark Imbriaco and myself. We sat down at DevOps Enterprise Summit last year and had a really great conversation that fortunately somebody there from Sonatype recorded. And then Rally Software also did a sort of a one-day conference on just ChatOps. There's a video with some really great stuff there as well. And then there's about a year and a half ago, I put together just a small little dummies book, ChatOps for Dummies. I unfortunately didn't have any hard copies to bring, but you can go and download that. Even though it's a year and a half old, it should still be pretty relevant. There's been a lot of changes in that year and a half, and as a result, I've got new things that I'd like to share and like to talk about. So I'm actually going to be working on a new book. I'm in the process actually right now for doing one for O'Reilly. And so right now is a perfect time to get great feedback. So if you have ideas, if you were to go to pick up a ChatOps from O'Reilly book, what would you expect to find in it? What are some things? What are some questions that you have? Or what would you like to learn? So I've got a little survey. I think it's only like 6 or 7 questions. Go in there and help me understand what you would like to find in a ChatOps O'Reilly book. And I'll be working on that in the next couple of months. Hopefully it'll be out by the end of this summer. And that's pretty much my time. I appreciate you coming and listening to my discussion on ChatOps. I'll be hanging around throughout the rest of the day. You can find me on Twitter. I'm just Jason at VictorOps. If you have any questions, you can send me an email. And those are where you can find the slides. So with that, I will say thank you.